A new 72-hour ceasefire in Gaza has been agreed between Israel and the Palestinians following mediation by Egypt. Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan wins Turkey's presidency in the first round of elections with 52.1% of the vote. And Islamic State militants continue their reign of terror in Iraq, killing up to 500 Yazidis as operations to root out the extremist group continue. Hello there, you're watching AEE TV World News and I'm Fatima Basim. The Palestinians and Israelis have reached a new 72-hour truce after mediated crunch talks in the Egyptian capital, Cairo. It was not immediately clear how the agreement was reached. However, Palestinian officials confirmed that a simultaneous consensus has finally been reached and that the beginning of the ceasefire will take effect at 12 midnight local time. The breakthrough comes after the Israelis previously ruled out negotiations unless Palestinian resistance groups stopped launching rockets on occupied territories. Hamas chief Khalid Mash'al told AFP in an exclusive interview in the Qatari capital Doha on Sunday that any lasting truce must be led by the lifting of the Israel blockade on the Gaza Strip. Mash'al also said that the 72-hour ceasefire Hamas reached with Israel on Sunday was one of the ways or tactics to ensure successful negotiations or to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza, adding that the final goal was having the demands of Palestinians met and that the Gaza Strip exists without a blockade. Israeli occupation forces have launched over 20 airstrikes on different parts of the Gaza Strip, killing at least 5 Palestinians and injuring scores. 1 child was killed and 3 others injured in a drone strike targeting Deir el-Balah, while an earlier air raid on Jabalia camp also caused 10 injuries. Israeli tanks have meanwhile shelled the southern city of Rafah, leaving 1 dead and many wounded. The Palestinian Health Ministry announced that 1,918 Palestinians have been killed and nearly 10,000 others injured after more than a month of Israeli aggression. The Palestinian resistance has meanwhile responded with a barrage of rockets on Israeli settlements, including Ashkelon and Sderot, while also forcing the closure of the Kerem Shalom border crossing. Let's speak to Balsam Al-Atrash, our Gaza correspondent. Balsam, tell us more about this 72-hour truce. What are Palestinian factions in Gaza saying?
Yes, true. Palestinian factions today confirmed that there will be a 72-hour ceasefire that will begin at midnight tonight in about an hour, meaning in about an hour. Dr. Sami Abu Marzouk has confirmed that both sides, the Palestinian side and the Israeli side, had agreed on the 72-hour ceasefire as another chance for them to reach a long-term agreement or a long-term ceasefire for the situation here in Gaza. But as we have been used to previous ceasefire, especially the one announced by the Israeli side, it appears that they intentionally escalate the situation before the ceasefire takes effect. The past 2 hours witnessed heavy air raids and airstrikes all across Gaza Strip. More than 15 air raids were carried out by the Israeli occupation forces warplane that led to the death of 4 more Palestinians today, which raised the death toll today alone to 8 Palestinians killed. So far, one of them is not even identified yet. The latest Israeli air raid was in the area of Khan Yunis. The airstrike was on a motorcycle that had 2 Palestinians on it. Both of them were killed, and another 2 passing by were killed as well. Also, the other air raids were on homes of Palestinians in the northern area of Gaza, also in the city of Gaza as well, leading to massive destruction in home residents in that area. The Israeli occupation forces are still, warplanes are still hovering the skies here in Gaza. We can still hear them, and they are still carrying out airstrikes, especially on agricultural areas as well. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Palestinian resistance groups are still firing rockets since the ceasefire has not begun yet. There's still an hour until the ceasefire begins, but the Palestinian Palestinian resistance groups are firing rockets towards southern Israeli settlements, especially in Beirut. There was breaking news about 10 minutes ago that sirens were heard in the Israeli settlements, Beirut actually, and there were material damage from these rockets.
All right, Bassam, thank you for those updates. Meanwhile, in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, hundreds attended a funeral procession on Sunday for a Palestinian boy killed by Israeli occupation forces in Al-Khalil. The 11-year-old boy was shot dead by Zionist forces during a confrontation with rock-throwing protesters in the occupied West Bank. The young boy was taken to a local hospital, which said he had been hit in the back with a live bullet. Well, anti-Israeli protests are continuing around the world. Tens of thousands of people flooded the streets of New York, London, Berlin and Santiago to express their solidarity with Palestinians in the besieged Gaza Strip and call for an end to the weeks-long brutal Israeli offensive.
Divided by distance, but united in one voice, anti-Israeli campaigns are gaining momentum across the world. Thousands of pro-Palestinians took to the streets of New York to protest against the brutal Israeli offensive in the Gaza Strip and demanded an end to the violence that has so far killed 1,917 Palestinians. A sea of Palestinian flags was the scene across Berlin's central Potsdamer Platz Square, where at least 2 rallies took place as people called for the German government to take action against the Zionist vicious attacks on Gaza.
It makes you very sad, angry, especially because we don't have the feeling that the German government is taking the position it should. Of course, it is difficult for Germany because of the country's history, but what's just is just, and it is clear that what is happening in Gaza is unjust.
Similar sentiments were echoed in San Diego's Main Avenue, with some 6,000 protesters demanding Chile cut ties with the Israeli entity.
We are present at this march to demand that the Chilean state, once and for all, break all types of relationships with Israel. The government would be acting as an accomplice to this huge massacre that Israel is carrying out against Palestine.
What the Israelis are doing today is genocide. They are killing the civilian population, and I, as a daughter and granddaughter of Palestinians in Chile, rise up here in Chile with the whole country to bring an end to this genocide.
But the largest demonstration, however, took place in London. According to Stop the War Coalition, which organized the event, it was the biggest ever UK demonstration for Gaza, with 150,000 people taking part in calling for the end of the Israeli onslaught on the besieged coastal enclave. Even though calls to end the war in Gaza have so far fallen on deaf ears, the growing anti-Israeli sentiment could not be silenced for much longer.
Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan has become the country's first popularly elected head of state after winning a presidential election with 52.1% of the votes.
Turkish strongman and current Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan has won the country's first ever direct presidential elections, ensuring he will remain at Turkey's helm for at least another 5 years. With 93.7% of ballot boxes opened, Erdogan was ahead with 52.1% of the votes. His main rival, Ekmeleddin Ihsanoglu, was shown at 37.81%, and the third candidate, Selahattin Demirtas, at 9.14%. Erdogan, who has served as prime minister since 2003 and overseen a rapid modernization of Turkey with strong growth and ambitious infrastructure projects, also faces growing accusations of eroding civil rights and seeking to Islamicize the secular state.
I want Ekmeleddin Ihsanoglu to win. I don't want political tension. If the Prime Minister will win, the situation will worsen. Therefore, I voted for Ekmeleddin Ihsanoglu. I hope he will win.
The polls are the first time Turkey is directly electing its president, who has previously been chosen by parliament and in recent decades has fulfilled a largely ceremonial role.
I hope the election will provide the best result for our country. People have begun queuing in front of polling stations since early hours of the morning. This is a positive step. This shows that people return from holiday to cast their votes. This is a good thing in terms of citizen awareness.
However, 60-year-old Erdogan, who is happy to be referred to as the Sultan, has made clear he intends to be a head of state who sweats and exercises real power. Erdogan's ruling Justice and Development Party, or AKP, has vowed to seek changes to the constitution to give the president more powers, which could give Turkey a presidential system similar to France's, rather than its current parliamentary democracy.
I hope that the results will be good for the sake of the country and for our people. I hope that the Turkish Republic will endure. I hope that we will bequeath a strong republic to the youth.
Yet Erdogan's opponents accuse him of undermining the secular legacy of Turkey's founding father Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, who based the state that emerged after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire on a strict separation between religion and politics. An absolute majority is needed to be Turkey's next president and avoid a runoff vote on August 24th, a move Erdogan has already accomplished.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan!
Let's speak to Turkish-based journalist Recep Duran. Mr. Duran, what would Erdogan's presidency mean for Turkey?
It will very probably mean a very important change of the political regime, of the political system. Because as you said, the Turkish constitution is designed for a parliamentarian system, but Erdogan is now looking for a French-type semi-presidential system. For that, he has to change the constitution, but to change the constitution, he will need a great majority in the parliament, which he doesn't have for the moment. So we will see for the next coming election in next year in 2015 during the summer.
Yes, and given that this is the first time the president is directly elected, how much power would the executive branch wield?
Well, in any case, there will be a constitutional crisis because the law is not very clear. Normally, the prime minister is the chief of the executive. But Erdogan is saying that the president of the republic should be the chief of executive. So very probably in the coming weeks, after that he will nominate the new prime minister, there will be a political and also constitutional conflict between the president of the republic and the prime minister. And who knows how this conflict will be solved.
Yes, would you agree that the campaigning was unfair for other candidates?
That's sure. This is not only my opinion or the opinion of local or foreign observers. The OSCE, the European Security and Cooperation Organization and also the European Council has sent 60 observers to this Turkish election. We will read their report, I think, next week. There have been, as a prime minister, he was able to use all the facilities, official public facilities, mainly on the media. At least 80% of the Turkish media was covering Erdogan, and only 20% was covering the other candidate. It was not fair, that was sure.
Would you say that Turkey is heading more or less towards democracy then?
Well, listening to Erdogan, yes, more democracy, and he is even speaking about progressive democracy. We don't know what is that exactly, but looking to some very concrete facts, it's sure that there is less and less democracy in this country since, let's say, 5 or 10 years, when Erdogan became more and more authoritarian president or prime minister.
Yes, and as president, can Erdogan be more conciliatory and bring what has become a polarized Turkey together?
Looking to the speech of the prime minister, or let's say to the president, yes. Theoretically speaking, he's always speaking as a voice of the nation, as a leader who unite everybody, so and so. But in the practice, mainly in this last 2-3 years, he was not at all uniting the whole nation. He was adopting, mainly about minorities like Armenians or Alevites or leftist people or most of the opposition people, a very heavy hate speech. And he was approximately for this Gülen sect, which was his ex-ally, on the public, on TV screens, on pro-government press. You can read things which are not really very polite that a prime minister can say. So he is a center of a polarized society.
Yes, and on the regional front, it seems that the Turkish leadership has made more enemies and less friends. What do you think? Do you think that Erdogan should change his position towards his partners in the Middle East?
Sure, but that will be a little bit difficult for him, because there is now, more than 5 years ago, Mr. Davutoğlu, the Turkish Minister of Foreign Affairs, has a very good objective, saying that we should have zero problem with our neighbors. Well, looking today to the relationship of Ankara with the neighbor, mainly in the Middle East, we do not have, Ankara have zero friends. Turkey have a problem with all of his neighbors. To change this policy, it will be really very difficult, because they think Ankara, or let's say Erdogan, is thinking that this is a correct policy, which is of course not, because we are seeing that so many people have been dying, killed because of this policy in our relationship with Iraq or in our relationship with Syria.
All right, Mr. Rajib Doran, thank you for speaking to Ali Tija.
Thank you.
Humanitarian aid is pouring into Iraq's restive northern region. Britain have joined the US in dispatching the much-needed aid, as French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius visited the country to oversee Paris's involvement in the war against the Islamic State militants. Their campaign to build an Islamic caliphate in Iraq, the so-called Islamic State militants have reportedly executed some 500 people belonging to the minority group, the Yazidis. The latest killings come as the notorious extremists continue their reign of terror in the north of the country.
It's not just aid and bombs that have been flown to Iraq in order to combat the rise of extremism in the country. Foreign dignitaries have also paid a visit to Baghdad to support the fight against Islamic State militants. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius requested the formation of a broader government to counter the threat posed by the IS expansion.
In this time, Iraq particularly needs a broad-based unity government because all Iraqis need to feel represented to wage the fight against terrorism together.
Fabius was speaking after a meeting with Iraq's Deputy Prime Minister and Acting Foreign Minister Hussein Shahristani before heading north to Erbil to oversee the delivery of French aid to displaced civilians. Fabius told Kurdistan Regional President Masoud Barzani that Paris will not be involved militarily in the Iraqi crisis.
A specific authorization is required from the United Nations Security Council, and the French population should be in danger. Currently, military interventions are not planned by France.
Indeed, we are not only fighting a terrorist group, we are fighting a terrorist state that is equipped with the best weaponry. So the weapons that they possess are more advanced than what the Peshmerga have. What we are asking our friends to do is to provide and support us, and to cooperate with us to provide the necessary weapons to enable us to defeat these terrorist groups.
The US was the first country to send aid to Iraq along with its airstrikes, which continued for the second day. The bombardments has targeted IS positions while the aid was dispatched to Iraqis stranded by the advancement of the militants in the northern part of Iraq, which is home to many minority groups. Britain also sent its first consignment of emergency aid to the region, which has been overrun by IS militants for 2 months.
At the moment, our focus is on supporting the humanitarian effort, trying to deal with the growing humanitarian crisis in Iraq, and waiting to see, as the new government is formed, whether it will be an inclusive government that we can get behind and support in its efforts.
Thousands of people are continuing to flee their homes in northern Iraq out of fear of being subjected to the horrors of the so-called Islamic State. And despite the horrendous atrocities committed, somehow Western leaders are convinced that only an inclusive government can end the unspeakable crimes being committed by the Takfiri extremist groups.
The vicious offensive by Islamic State militants is continuing in northern Iraq, with extremists reportedly killing at least 500 members of the country's Yazidi ethnic minority group. According to Iraq's human rights minister, the extremist militants had also buried alive some of their victims, including women and children. Some 300 other women were also taken as hostages. Sinjar is the ancient home of the Yazidis, one of the towns captured by the extremists who view the community as devil worshippers and have ordered the minority group to convert to Islam or face death. The deadline for the ultimatum, however, expired at midday on Sunday for 300 Yazidi families. The Islamic State, which has declared a caliphate in parts of Iraq and Syria, has prompted tens of thousands of Yazidis and Christians to flee for their lives. Officials say that at least 20,000 civilians who had been besieged by the militants on a mountain in northern Iraq have safely escaped to Syria and escorted by Kurdish forces back into Iraq. Thousands of terrified people, mostly from the minority group that have been persecuted by IS, fled to Mount Sinjar a week ago when militants overran the region. They are experiencing extremely hot conditions and a lack of food and water supplies. Dozens of Yazidis were saved on Saturday, but thousands more remain in the mountainous area, where Al-Qaeda-linked militants continue to impose their reign on terror in the region.
Let's speak to Professor at the American University of Beirut, Dr. Ahmad Mosalli, who joins us from our Beirut studios. Dr. Mosalli, is it too late for the advances of the IS to be reversed in Iraq?
Well, now they have established a state, and in order to fight the ISIS, you need a coalition of groups and probably foreign support in order to put down the activities of the IS. So it is not easy, actually, and we see that the international community is just doing very little, whether in terms of a humanitarian support or in terms of political aid or military support. It's a very difficult situation, and it seems obvious that so many states like the US, France, and England has made it a condition for supporting Iraq that there is a new government that unifies the different elements of Iraq. It is not possible, at least for now, to support in a massive way the current government or in particular the Prime Minister.
Could we say that the US is now in the Islamic State crosshairs now that they are directly involved in the conflict?
Well, the West is from the very beginning involved in the conflict, whether in creating it or now in terms of trying to solve it. But it is, as I said, it's not easy either way now to resolve it politically or militarily. The efforts of the neighboring countries, as well as probably aerial support from powerful states like the US, France, and others, are needed in order to put down that state. The state now, the assumed Islamic Caliphate, is very powerful, have very modern weaponry, and it is obvious that they have the money to recruit more people, and a lot of them have been trained in a very good way. And therefore, it is not the question of whether countries want to put them down. I think now there is a kind of decision that is being formed about how to deal with the ISIS, but the main or starting point in a serious job against them is the unity of the Iraqi entity and the unity of a new Iraqi government.
But don't you think that there are ulterior motives to this US involvement other than the stated protection of minority groups?
Well, I don't think the US or others will be having troops on the ground. They may increase later their military support. However, the issue of minority, I think because of the tremendous pressure that has been put against or on the Western government in order to protect minorities, whether Christians or now the Yazidis and other. We know all of this started with the invasion of Mosul and the starting of pushing the Christians either to convert to Islam or to pay jizya or being killed and so forth. But nonetheless, I think even if that is the aim of some Western powers, it's too weak to make any change on the ground or to make the IS change its methodology, which is based on shocking people, killing people, and therefore make them run away from their areas.
Now, the West said that it will be sending military aid if there is an inclusive government. How much should we read into this, given that Iraqi lawmakers are now trying to appoint a prime minister?
Well, I think if you have a united government, that would ease away internally and reduce the sectarian tension, which will allow more military support and therefore a better army that could fight the ISIL. And in that sense, yes, I think there will be some support, given something you mentioned before, that the West now feels that this group and similar groups are becoming more dangerous, not only within Iraq or Syria, but beyond, probably to some allies like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and beyond to the West itself.
Let's not forget that the IS isn't what it is today had the US allies in the region not funded them. Did the US strategy completely go wrong, or was it their plan all along? Some would say it was.
Well, I think the initial step in supporting such groups came from some Western powers as well as some powers in the Gulf that had in mind the destruction of the Syrian regime. So they were supported actually, and the training and the money and the people that came into Syria and later Iraq was not, an accident or just a group of people wanting to getting together. Of course, there seems to be states behind all of this. Now, given the facts now that the ISIL is not anymore, listening to others by now having their own state, they have their own finance, they have their own oil, and they don't need any more financial support. I think the hold on them is weakening to a point that those who created them are now afraid of them, and this is why there might be some will to support the current Iraqi government in order to either destroy or very much decrease this power of the Islamic Caliphate.
But even Peshmerga forces were known to be well equipped and well trained. Were they no match for the militant groups?
I don't think the Peshmerga want to go fight the fight or the main fight with the ISIL. Remember that with the intrusion or invasion of the ISIL into Iraq, the Kurds expanded their areas into about, or increased their area 30% without fighting the radical Takfiris. I think now the conflict with the Takfiris is over certain areas rather than they want to destroy the ISIL. In that sense, I don't think the Peshmerga, unless they are forced by external power, will be fighting the ISIL army or groups. The minorities we see are running away into Kurdish area just for protection, but the Peshmerga, I think, will be happy just to defend their own areas.
But what about President Barzani's statehood ambitions? What will happen to them?
Well, I think ambitions are ambitions, and with the current situation, I think the Kurds have more land than they really hoped for having, and that was facilitated indirectly, or I don't know, some say directly, by the ISIL. However, I don't think the Kurds want to fight the major war that should be fought by the central government. But maybe with pressure from the US and others, they may be helping in fighting the Takfiris in order to unite Iraq. Now the question, how much do the Kurds want a united Iraq? I think it's very much questionable.
All right, Dr. Ahmad Musalli, a political analyst and professor at the American University of Beirut, thank you for speaking to Ali Tijah. You're watching Ali Tijah World News, still to come. Wael al-Halqi appointed as Syrian Prime Minister. Welcome back to Al Ittijah World News. Here's a reminder of our top stories. A new 72-hour ceasefire in Gaza has been agreed between Israel and the Palestinians following mediation by Egypt. Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan wins Turkey's presidency in the first round of elections with 52.1% of the vote. Islamic State militants continue their reign of terror in Iraq, killing up to 500 Yazidis as operations to root out the extremist group continue. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has reappointed Wael al-Halqi as the country's next prime minister. Syrian state media reported that President Assad has issued a decree requiring Halqi to form the new government. President Assad was sworn in for a new term as president last month, requiring the formation of a new government. Al-Halqi was first appointed as Syrian premier back in 2012 after serving as health minister. A passenger plane has crashed near the Iranian capital Tehran, killing at least 40 people. A technical failure reportedly caused the aircraft to go down shortly after takeoff. Our Tehran correspondent Hussein Dabash was at the tragedy scene and found the following report.
A tragic day for the Islamic Republic of Iran after a plane carrying dozens of people crashed in broad daylight. The Iranian passenger jet carrying 48 people, including passengers and cabin crew, came crashing down in the heart of the Iranian capital Tehran shortly after takeoff and just before 10 a.m. local time. Most of those on board, including men, women, and children, were killed in the crash just several kilometers north of the Mehrabad airport. 3 people are said to be in critical condition. The jetliner, named Iran 140, is a product of Iran which utilizes Ukrainian technology, was heading to the northeastern province of South Khorasan. Here at the crash site, eyewitnesses recalled the final moments of the fateful flight.
I
was trying to get a taxi. Then I see a plane descending and I heard a loud explosion and smoke was billowing over the area. I rushed to see what happened. It's a very tragic incident. I feel sorry for the family members of the dead.
I was nearby heading to work. Then I saw there was a plane that seemed to be taking off but then descending. Then all of a sudden I see smoke and the plane was heading down to the ground. I knew something was wrong. I rushed to see if I could help.
The bodies of those killed have been taken to morgues in nearby hospitals, where the families of those dead passengers will be granted access to the bodies to organize funerals. This is not the first plane accident in Iran. In fact, there have been a series of similar incidents which have been blamed on aging aircrafts and poor maintenance. The most recent plane accident took place in 2011 when a passenger jet carrying 77 people crashed while trying to make an emergency landing in northwestern Iran. The Iranian government has on many occasions stressed that it is not receiving the much needed aircraft parts and airplanes because of the harsh sanctions which have been imposed on the Islamic Republic over its nuclear energy program. Although investigators are still looking into this latest plane crash, it comes as sanctions imposed on Iran for over 3 decades now are still in place. These sanctions have been imposed by the United Nations, the European Union, and the United States, and they claim that they target the Iranian government and Iran's nuclear energy program. But it is evident and clear after today's plane crash, and many before it, that the sanctions are killing the Iranian people. Reporting for Al Ittijah TV, Hussein Dabash, Tehran.
Yemeni warplanes launched a series of air raids against suspected al-Qaeda positions in Hadramaut province. According to a military official, the raids caused casualties, but a death toll could not be provided. The army had reinforced its positions in Hadramaut ahead of the anticipated operation against militants in the region. Sheikh Abdulatif Daryan has been elected as Lebanon's new Grand Mufti following a consensus among the country's Sunni leaders. Daryan's election came after Egypt and Saudi Arabia brokered a deal between Qabbani and the Future Movement, ending 3 years of tension at Dar al-Fatwa, Lebanon's higher Islamic council for Sunni Muslims. An Egyptian court has ordered the dissolution of the Freedom and Justice Party, the political wing of the already banned Muslim Brotherhood movement. Our Cairo correspondent Karim Azzuddin has the details.
A court in Egypt has ordered the dissolution of the Freedom and Justice Party, the Muslim Brotherhood's political wing, and frozen the movement's assets over concerns that the group has been funding terrorist activities. The ruling will prevent the movement from formally running in the upcoming parliamentary elections, scheduled to be held later this year.
The ruling does not prevent Muslim Brotherhood members from participating, as they can still run as individuals or through other entities, as the electoral law is based mainly on an individual system.
The ruling wouldn't be efficient unless it was issued against specific names, including the Muslim Brotherhood leaders, to prevent them from participating in the elections.
Egyptian authorities declared the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization in December, after accusing the group of orchestrating a wave of violence in order to destabilize the country, following the ouster of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi in July of last year. The Muslim Brotherhood has, however, denied having any links to the militant groups, specifically those in the Sinai Peninsula who are responsible for the killing of hundreds of Egyptian security personnel.
I think it's politically motivated to prevent Muslim Brotherhood members from rejoining the political scene, in addition to accusing the group of terrorism and violence, which only serves to isolate them from the political arena.
The political wing of the banned Muslim Brotherhood movement can no longer run in the upcoming parliamentary elections. Its members, however, can run either as individual candidates or form a new political party. Muslim Brotherhood supporters have criticized the ruling, describing it as politically motivated and serving the interests of the current regime. The severe crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood continues as an Egyptian court has issued a verdict banning its political party over accusations of supporting violence. But will this verdict bring back the missing stability before the parliamentary elections? A question yet to be answered. Reporting for Bulletin TV from Cairo, Karim Azzuddin.
Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko has said he is considering allowing humanitarian assistance into besieged areas in the east of the country. Poroshenko added that in a statement that any aid mission should be fulfilled under international observation and only through border checkpoints controlled by Ukrainian authorities. This comes as pro-Russian separatists called for a ceasefire in Donetsk and Luhansk, where the humanitarian situation continues to worsen with a lack of water and electricity. At least 6 people, including 2 policemen, have been killed in renewed clashes between security forces and supporters of an anti-government cleric in the Pakistani province of Punjab. Violence erupted as followers of Tahir ul-Qadri gathered in different cities across the country in protest against the government. Our police blocked roads leading to Lahore and used tear gas to disperse the crowds. The prominent cleric recently returned to Pakistan and vowed to lead a peaceful revolt against Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. A bus carrying Chinese tourists has plunged off a cliff in Tibet, killing 44 people and injuring 11. Regional government officials said that the 55-seat bus crashed into a sports utility vehicle and a pickup truck before veering off the road. Images from the scene show rescue workers retrieving bodies from the overturned bus. The art of manual cloth weaving is one of the few surviving traditions in northern Sudan, with many residents in the area highly dependent on the trade as a source of income. Our correspondent Ahmed Saeed Ahmed gives us a look now into this ancient craft.
Industrialization and technology have both transformed the world. There are, however, many traditional crafts that have survived, albeit barely, in the 21st century. One of those is the art of manual weaving. One of the few surviving traditions in northern Sudan is manual cloth weaving. In the city of Shendi, many locals still depend on it as their primary source of income. One such example is the Sudanese couple who, for the better part of their lives and up until today, still earn their living through cloth weaving at home, using the traditional weaving system of pulleys and ropes. It is particularly common amongst the Coptic citizens of Shendi.
We, of course, produce sleeping covers, scarves, sheets, men and women's wear, such as traditional Sudanese men and women wear.
It is neither easy nor very profitable, yet it is how John and Hania make a living and can prove to be quite time-consuming. Making one sheet takes 2 to 2 days and a half. 2 days in case there's not much else to do around the house. 2.5 if anything else arises that requires standing to. John is in charge of weaving men's wear, while Hania women's wear. They spend their days working to make beautiful, colorful, and long-lasting clothing items that are still very much in demand. My wife, Hania, is the one who handles marketing our products.
We receive orders from customers, and that's how we sell our products. We don't take our products to the market. Market traders want cheap products with questionable quality. My products, on the other hand, are durable and of high quality.
The tradition, however, started with neither John nor Hania. It dates back to earlier generations.
Essentially, this vocation was passed down to us from our parents. Growing up, we started by working on minor clothing items at about 5 or 6 years of age. Then at 8, we became full-fledged workers.
It doesn't come as a surprise that customers say that traditionally made clothes are better than modern-day outfits and are also much more durable. With both John and Hania taking pride in the weaving skills, the younger generations, they say, have shied away from the tradition. Traditional manual cloth weaving is one of the few arts still surviving in this part of the country, just a few kilometers away from a major site of the pyramids, and its products are still demanded, favored and cherished by many. Ahmed Saeed Ahmed, Al-Ittijah News Channel, Shendi City, Northern Sudan.
Here's a reminder of our top stories. A new 72-hour ceasefire in Gaza has been agreed between Israel and the Palestinians following mediation by Egypt. Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan wins Turkey's presidency in the first round of elections with 52.1% of the vote. And Islamic State militants continued their reign of terror in Iraq, killing up to 500 Yazidis as operations to root out the extremist group continue. Well, that's all from me and the Al-Ittijah News team. Thank you for watching and good night.